Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Johnson City Board of Commissioners to order for Thursday, January 18th, 2018. If you'll rise for the invocation by Jim Richmond, lead pastor of Northridge Community Church, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Father, we come before you this evening humbly, acknowledging that without you we can really do nothing, nothing of any significance or anything of any eternal significance, certainly. And God, I thank you for the men and the women that stand before me, that lead our city. Thank you that they are where they are because they followed the example of your Son in serving others and serving our community. Father, I pray for them and all their endeavors and their families in every way, God, that you would go before them so that they can be efficient and effective as they try to pour into this community and into the lives of others and serve others. God, we commit everything that happens here tonight to you. We ask for your wisdom in all that is considered. And Father, we ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Mr. Peterson, before we start, I think we have one item we need to add to the agenda. It is the formation of a sesquicentennial commission. Do I have a motion to add that to tonight's agenda?
Move to add to the agenda.
Second. We have a motion and a second. And we'll just add that to the city manager's report.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Jennings, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Broccoli.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor Tamita.
Yes, I thought I'd give a delay direction.
Your next order of business is consideration of the minutes of your meeting held on Thursday, January.
All right, any discussion, corrections, amendments on the minutes? Do I have a
Move to
motion?
accept the minutes.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second, any more discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Broccoli.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor Tamita.
Yes.
This takes us to the manager's report, and to begin the manager's report, let's take up the resolution dealing with the Sesquicentennial Commission. As we talked last time, we had Mr. Stahl put together the resolution before you this evening that would call for the commission to appoint up to 11 citizens to the commission for a term to begin on appointment and expire upon the conclusion of the activities in December of 2019. I would point out to you that the actual day of the sesquicentennial is December 1st, 2019. So this sets up the framework for the appointment of a committee. It also contemplates the establishment of subcommittees or working groups. It also lays out that you all are in charge of setting any sort of operating budget that may be needed to carry out the activities of the committee or the committees, and that the Sesquicentennial Commission shall have no authority to incur any expense, expend funds, or enter into any contracts or agreements without the formal prior approval of this Board of Commissioners. So I think this does a nice job of laying out the framework of the commission and getting things started.
Okay. Any comments, discussion? This is a big deal. We are a little late, I think. Our neighbors, Tri-City neighbors, started 3 years before their centennial, so we'll have to work fast. But I'd like to have this commission, or this commission appointed by our next meeting, and charge them with hastily having their first meeting to get started. So
I think just a couple of things, Mayor, and perhaps this board, as we come together to suggest names for the committee. the first question is, do we want to have a year-long celebration, or do we want to define it to a more finite period of time since it's not until the last quarter of 2019? So those are some things we can think about. And then maybe at our next agenda review, we can each submit some names. I don't know, is there a recommendation on what size this committee needs to be, Mr. Peterson, or?
It says 11 in
Well, we're up
here.
to 11.
I missed that, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So,
And I think there's any number of subcommittees and task force
Sure.
that'll
That
spin off
grow
of
out of
this,
this.
but the main committee, you would want that certainly as a manageable number and not too large, so.
And I guess one of the other things is we each, think about maybe recommending 2 people or so, is from what disciplines do we want them to be able to represent? I mean, obviously, you've got things like historic, you've got, children's activities, you've got a lot of different things. You've got the university, which has a great deal of history. We want to make sure that all our community is represented, on this committee. So those are just some things as we're thinking about the commission. We want to make sure we get represented on it.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to get too broad a representation, but again, we have to bear in mind that there will be numerous spin-off groups that will handle individual. I think we need folks that can get things done, can move agendas forward, and get people excited and involved and engaged in we really hadn't talked about it, but that probably should be a year-long celebration. I mean, it's a big deal. Kick it off on New Year's, integrate it into things we do throughout the year with a big party on the actual day. Would seem to make a lot of sense. If there's the will to do that, we'll need a little money to do that, but there's if we copy our neighbors, a capital project that we could undertake that would acknowledge that. Public-private partnership, matching, try to get individuals and corporations, corporate sponsors to do that. Again, we don't have time for a major project, but, I think there's some things we talked about up at Tannery Knobs that might make a really good project for this sesquicentennial pavilion or sign or something along those lines. But again, we're running out of time because it'll be here before we know it. So we'll hopefully dispatch of that, get that rolling at the next meeting.
So going forward, will we just, at our next agenda review?
Yeah.
should we
Set
approach
the
people
parameters.
before we get there?
I would
Just
imagine.
like 2 people each and then
Yeah.
see, or something like that?
Yep. Let's go from there. All right. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Or do we have a motion and a second? Can we have a motion and a second? How about a motion?
I move to accept the resolution, to move forward with it.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes.
In an effort to expedite the process and make it easier on the commissioners at your next agenda review, if you all would like, we would welcome any thoughts, ideas from you all individually so that we could start collecting all of those and try to have an outline of the ideas that you all have come up with. And we'll work as a staff to consult with other communities that have celebrated significant milestones and get some ideas or a list of ideas of what others have done. And would that be helpful to you all to streamline the process a little bit on the front end? Okay, so if you'd just send us your thoughts, we'd be glad to process those and have it together. Okay.
Very good.
Next, I'd like to ask Link Elmore to come forward and give us a presentation on our unmanned aerial vehicles and a program that we are in the process of, no pun intended, launching here. We'll see if we can fly through this fairly quickly, Link.
It just keeps getting worse.
Droning on again, yes.
All right.
Well, thank you, Mr. Peterson and Commissioners, for the opportunity to share with you some information tonight about the city's unmanned aerial vehicles program and how we hope it can be useful for the public. So what are we talking about? Unmanned aerial vehicles, more commonly known and colloquially referred to as drones, sometimes referred to as remote piloted aircraft. And so those are really just an aircraft of some kind, be it a small helicopter or a fixed wing aircraft, affixed with a sensor and usually a GPS receiver device of some type so that it knows where it is in space. And these instruments are tools. They collect images and video. They're also capable of streaming video in certain configurations. And certain sensors are capable of capturing imagery, both what the human eye can see in the visual light spectrum, but also beyond in the infrared and in the thermal, so that you actually gain more knowledge than just what the human eye can appreciate. All of these, by law, have to be registered with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and they are the agency that maintains the laws and regulations that govern this activity, and they make a distinction between those hobbyists and those uses by governmental agencies or for commercial uses. Obviously, everything tonight that we'll be talking about is the latter category, and none of what we're mentioning here tonight has any impact on the public or their activities. This is purely our policy for city employee usage. So this was put together by a working group of staff from various departments, and we recognized that our expertise, lacked the legal backing to speak to this very emerging area of law, and so we engaged an outside expert. We're fortunate in Tennessee to have a legal expert who practices in Nashville with this particular area of specialty, and we were engaging of his services to help us author our policy. And the goal for our policy was to establish guidelines, a framework for city employees to use that provides for consistency across departments, safe and legal operation. We presented this recommendation to the city manager and received approval earlier this month. No flights have taken place. That's partially because of the weather. It's not conducive to drone flights right now. Batteries don't like cold weather, and propellers don't like snow. So while we own a UAV and have 2 FAA licensed remote pilots on staff for the city, we haven't engaged in any activities under this policy as yet. So the policy dictates that the administrative record-keeping functions will be held in the police department, and that information technology will oversee the data processing and distribution side. All the images that are coming out of the drone are geo-tagged, and so they lend themselves very well to being distributed through the GIS system. And of course, risk management will oversee all the insurance requirements. The housing of the administrative side of things within the police department is consistent with how other cities in Tennessee have approached this, particularly Murfreesboro, who we used as a partner in helping us understand, how to proceed. So what do you do with these things? Near and dear to my heart as the GIS person mapping, you can use them to fly over. Here's a good example of our new King Commons area, and all of the infrastructure that was placed in there will need to be digitized and put into our GIS. And this offers an opportunity to create those features. The state of Tennessee gives us new aerial images about every 5 to 6 years, and they often deliver them about a year and a half or 2 years after they've taken them. So there's a bit of a lag there. This will provide us an opportunity to have a much shorter timeline between something being true on the ground and our ability to image it for our systems. There's many benefits, including engineering, surveying, and project management, public safety concerns, energy conservation on a cold day like today, to be able to see where heat is escaping from city buildings that might need some attention and maintenance. Economic development is a use that other cities have engaged in, where they feature building inventories and aerial images so that prospective companies can see where they might set up shop. If we ever did have a disaster, emergency management could benefit by being able to quantify our claims for FEMA using the drone. And so monitoring of special events, of course, is also of interest to community relations. So the benefits to the public, we see that better data leads to better decision making. And this is a data collection tool. While your friends and neighbors might have received one for Christmas to fly around and have fun with, and we hope they do have fun, this is really a scientific instrument, and it's a tool, and so a way for city employees to make better decisions by gathering the data. We hope to update our aerial imagery in the GIS that we push to city mapping applications on the website. Do so, as I said before, in a safe, legal, and consistent manner, and be able to respond quickly if there were a threatening situation that the police needed to be aware of, situational awareness. They could stream that directly to the command center. Finally, just to point out that efficiency gains in data collection reduce project costs, and the better estimates we can make on the front end increase our accuracy and reduce our costs. Perhaps the most important is that we have a beautiful city, and the drone really shows that off. We have a story to tell, and this is yet another way for us to let folks know, and it's great to live and work in Johnson City. So without droning on, if you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
So how many have their pilot's license? You do?
I do, and Officer Crow, back here, the police force.
You're not going to let Mr. Pinzola drive one, right?
If he gets licensed by the FAA, it's all up to him.
And how many drones do we have?
We have one
Oh,
present.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I do have one other question. I see Chief Staples back here. Because of the thermal camera capacity, will you be able to use these, in evaluating fires? Because now you can get up over the
Yes, ma'am.
The structures?
I've seen these used throughout the nation, and we've actually used them back where I came from, so they're of great value.
Very good. Thank you.
Be a very, very valuable tool in search and rescue. If somebody gets lost on Buffalo Mountain, which happens with a fair amount of regularity, it'd be a lot quicker to find them with the infrared camera than it would be to send people out on foot looking for someone. Yes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just an update on several other things that have been going on. As you all are aware, North Star was in here last week and is working on our branding project. That's moving along on schedule, and the feedback that we got initially was that the meetings were very productive and produced what they needed to work with. I guess an unanticipated benefit of their work is during some of their community conversations, they're really starting the dialogue of a long-term strategic plan or a long-term community visioning process. I think their work as this thing moves along will be a very good platform from which to launch a community-wide visioning process. It's been many years since the city, the chamber, anybody locally really undertook a community-wide visioning process. I know there was Johnson City 2020, I think, was the last version of it. And this, I think, would be a really good starting point to maybe launch a Johnson City 2045 or 2050, whatever date is decided. But they're generating some really good comments and some insight from a wide variety of folks in our community. The Kefauver Farm, that conversion process is final. Everything's recorded. That is concluded. I really want to take just a second and thank John Witherspoon for all of his hard work. He works in Congressman Rowe's office, And he really bird dogged this thing to finally get National Park Service to get this concluded. Did a great job. February 1st is the date that the two proposers for the Freedom Hall Management Agreement will be here to make presentations. I think Charlie's got time set up out there on the calendar for those interviews. Once we hear those proposals, we're hopeful we can move pretty quickly to make a decision on that. Buffalo Valley is closed as of the end of the year, as was directed. Property is secured. The RFP seeking interest in, by those that may have an interest in buying the property is out. Those are due back to us by February the 7th. So by the last meeting in February, first meeting in March, we should probably have a recommendation together in terms of how we, before you, for you to consider how we want to move forward with final disposition of the real estate over there. The new poles and the fixtures are up in place at Cardinal Park. I think they're still doing some wiring and some testing before that project will be 100% complete. But that's been a real smooth project to this point. The ladies from Blackburn Childress are here tonight to go over the audit and give you the results of that. Aerospace Park, as you might have seen in the media the other day, the state of Tennessee has notified the airport that they are going to be awarded $4.1 million of the $8.5 million request. Patrick and his staff are currently evaluating how best to move forward. They have been told that there is a possibility of further funding in this current budget cycle, this legislative session that's going on this spring. I think what they're looking at now is how best to proceed with the money in hand to get the project started and get it moving until other grants and funding can be put into place to make up the balance of that. The Science Hill bank stabilization, the bids are on your agenda this evening for approval, so that's moving forward. The athletic fields, we had the workshop this afternoon to talk about what direction to go. We had, I thought, a very good discussion about the potential development of some rectangular fields there on the lakefront at Winged Deer. And there will be further discussions, as we discussed earlier, about what we do with diamond fields and how all that comes together. We have eliminated the golf director position, as was part of the plan to close Buffalo Valley. Mr. Ellis has an unfilled assistant park and rec director. We have moved Jim Hughes into that position on an interim basis. We've also got a number of retirements that continue to occur. Janet's assistant is going to be retiring in March, and our two of our three management analysts have been offered career changes with pretty significant change in compensation. So we're going to be losing Dustin Thompson and Tom's management analyst, Asa, first of the month. So those are mission critical positions, and we've got advertisements out to try to hurry and get those filled. I'd be glad to answer any questions or provide additional information along those lines, or anything else that you may have.
Mr. Peterson, now that we just have Pine Oaks, this didn't report to Parks and Rec when Jim was over the golf director, did it? How's it going to be restructured?
Golf reported back through Charlie,
Yeah.
as
okay.
does Parks and Rec.
Okay, so how
Okay.
will that
The
be restructured now?
comptroller's office has communicated to us that with the amount of money that we've been transferring from general fund over to golf, that really needs to be a part of or a component of the general fund. So as we have talked earlier, what we will be bringing before you during the budget process will be to move golf into Parks and Rec. It will still be accounted for and reported as a separate entity. I guess a good example of that was we track senior services separately. It's part of Parks and Rec, but we can go and tell you what the revenues are, what the expenses are, what we spent the money on. The level of detail will not be diminished. So with the current configuration, then golf will report back through Parks and Rec and still end up with Charlie's position. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We've got the ladies here to give the audit report. Do you want to do that as a part of my report, or do you want to leave it as later on the agenda?
We've got some folks here that we need to
Okay.
get on. If it's all the same, why don't we go ahead?
Yes, sir.
and Move through the agenda, and I know you want to see the rest of this, right? You wouldn't want to miss that, but you would have stayed anyway,
You're
right?
saving the audit for last,
This-
because it's going to be the most interesting.
It is. It's a good thing, so we like it.
So we'll try to move along.
All right, the next item on your agenda is consideration of an appointment to the Johnson City Planning Commission. The term of Jeff Benedict has expired due to his resignation. The advertisement was made. There were 5 applications that came forward. This appointment will fulfill the remainder of the term vacated by Mr. Benedict, which is a normal 3-year term. The term will expire in July of 2019.
Very good. Do we have any discussion, or would somebody like to make a nomination?
I think probably the best way with this one is, since we've got a lot of capable candidates to vote individually who we prefer, I'll lead off and indicate that of the 5 candidates here, 3 are serving on other boards. Currently, we've involved them in one fashion or another. Of the remaining 2, there's one that I think his qualifications are a little different than what we've seen on the Planning Commission. Their qualifications have become more important all the time, and that's experience in communications, cable broadcasting, and public affairs for city government. So my support this time around would go to Michael Williams for that reason.
I support Commissioner Van Brocklin's recommendation. I do know Mr. Williams. He grew up here. He's a graduate of Science High School in 1967, which is a year I know very well. Has a vast experience, particularly working for the city of Raleigh for his last 12 years, I think, in his career, and has returned to Johnson City to retire. So he's has a lot of great skills, great communication skills, as well as a thorough knowledge of city planning. Worked a lot with city planning in Raleigh. So I certainly support him as well.
Mr. Fowler?
After hearing that, that sounds like a great recommendation, so I think I would go with that also.
All right. Ms. Jennings, do we need a vote?
If you want to handle that just by roll call,
Okay.
what about,
I would make the motion that we accept Michael Williams for a position on the Regional Planning Commission.
A second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor Tomita.
Yes.
Next order of business is to make 4 appointments to the Board of Building Codes. If you will recall, this board requires the appointment of people in certain trades. The applicants for the 4 open positions are Tim McGahee, Sam Lindley, Jim Green, Don Cox, and Mr. Mark Carrier.
Mr. Peterson, do I understand correctly that the one position that is contested is James Green versus Mr. Carrier? Is that correct? And that the other 3, the architectural, Tim McGahee, Sam Lindley for engineer, and Donald Cox, gas and mechanical, are the ones that don't have anybody else vying for the position? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Let me,
Like Mr. Carrier is contractor and Mr. Green is contractor.
Yes, the only reason I was double checking to see if there was a requirement for a plumbing representative, since Mr. Carrier is also a licensed plumber.
Doesn't look
And
like
I
that
do
one's
not
up
see
this
that.
time.
They're looking for architectural engineer, commercial building, gas mechanical. So that would be correct, sir.
Okay. Mr. Green has had 100% attendance. He's in his first-year term, so he's not termed out at this point. To my knowledge, he's held those duties and done them, performed them very capably. So my recommendation, I'll make a motion that we approve Tim McGahee, Samuel Lindley, Donald Cox, and James Green for positions on the Johnson City Board of Building Codes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes.
Next item for consideration is the consent agenda.
All right, we'll go left to right. Commissioner Fowler, anything you'd like to pull for individual discussion?
No, thank you.
Okay. Vice Mayor Brown?
I'd like to pull A1, please, which is consider a lease agreement with Johnson City Development Authority for property located them an opportunity to present the reason why they would like to lease this property, a little bit about the program that they have in mind. And I know the commission had some questions regarding your concerns about the term of the lease and the rent that would be applied. So I can pull that one.
All right. I have nothing, so A1. Ms.
City
Tetzlaff, I guess
Commission,
you're here.
Mr. Peterson, my name's Trevor Tetzlaff. I'm the chairman of the Economic Vitality Committee for downtown. I work with Diana Cantler and the rest of the JCDA. I live at 401 West Main Street here in Johnson City. So the Business Incubator Program is the third, I guess you would call it the third leg of our Downtown Strong Initiative. And what our Downtown Strong Initiative is about is taking proactive measures to create opportunities for business growth and vitality in our downtown. The first tier is our Co-Starters program, which is geared towards educating entrepreneurs. Our second is going to be a downtown market for makers in our pavilion. And the issue before you today is our Business Incubator Program. What we're asking of the city is to lease that property to us, and it's just not going to be a space. The emphasis really is that it's a program. It's a program geared towards making sure that we get in the right individual into the program. This would be someone that comes from our Co-Starters class, so has received some educational backing, or it's also someone that has demonstrated, that they have business experience. By coming into this program, they would be signing up. So if you want the space, you get the package deal as well. And we think that by the commission supporting this program of the Business Incubator Program, it allows individuals the opportunity to get an affordable space, get on their feet, really get going, and then later on start to look at other venues in our downtown. And we want them to succeed, but also if for whatever reason they don't succeed, that's also a good plus for that individual, because then, before they got into the thick of things, they're not buried over their head. So if you have any questions about the program, obviously we want try to get the lowest cost deal that we can, but we were awarded a $10,000 grant. A big part of that will be going towards the pop-up market, and then we'll be using volunteer hours, and other people's time to fix up the current space that we're looking at leasing.
Will the candidates who may apply for the space, will they have to go through you named 3 programs, and the second one was,
No, you don't have to go through all 3. So the reason I just do that is you're going to hear downtown strong a lot. We want that to kind of catch on and that to be something that continues to grow. Right now, we have these 3-tiered programs, and really what it's geared toward is almost like a little business ecosystem, if you think about it. So instead of downtown waiting for things to happen, we're taking a proactive measure to grow our own talent locally here and support them. It's been shown that the most successful businesses, especially in the downtown, are come from people that are locally going to be supported by it. And so we're trying to take as many proactive measures as we can to educate, give affordable space, and then at this 3rd tier, encourage people to open up a business in the downtown spaces that we have available. And by filling those spaces, we'll increase foot traffic. Foot traffic increases the safety downtown, and it also, by more people frequenting downtown, it makes it more attractive to other candidates, maybe outside of the community, that may be considering downtown Johnson City.
Trevor, I think there were 3 issues that, at least to a degree, Diana and I spoke about, and we've spoken about a little bit as far as the commission. One has to do with the length of the lease. So if you'll speak to us a little bit about why 24 works better for you than 17. Another has to do with considering that we do have some utility costs in the building. JCDA preferred that there be no dollar amount attached to the lease. Commission has some questions about that a little bit. And then the other aspect of this, you're getting one space within that building currently. There's been some conversation, I know, that at some point you might want additional spaces. So if you can talk to us a little bit about what your hopes are along those lines so that we're prepared for these discussions down the road if in fact that becomes one.
Okay, I'll address the first as you show. The length amount of time that we're looking at leasing. So obviously with the first space, this is you don't want to, what do they say, bite off more than you can chew. So it's best to first start with this first space. I think it's a good idea to get a longer term commitment that 24 months initially for us to, right now we'd have to get the space available. We're looking at, right now, maybe a grand opening in that space around June. In terms of the cost, in terms of operating it, we will be generating some lease revenue from the leasee. I think in your packet, I think that's the 3rd page. So the first 3 months, the leasee isn't paying anything. But then after that, we want to take that money and continue to build that into our Downtown Strong program so that we do have revenue available. So starting off the program, we have to see how well it works. And obviously moving in down the road with those other space, that's going to be a thing that the City Commission, ultimately you guys, what you long-term, or if you put those properties up for sale, or however you choose to develop them. But right now, they're vacant, or that one property is vacant. I know Hands-On is going to be going. There's the J.C. Penney's building, and then the people in Umoja. So I think part of it is getting the ball rolling on it, and also having the flexibility to see how things work out. It's going to be a continuous dialogue, but I think initially a good 24-month commitment starting off will be good for us, and hopefully maybe 24 months from now you guys won't need to. There'll be people that want to lease the space, you know what I mean? We'll have further developed the interest in starting businesses downtown and filling some of those spaces. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, to a degree it does. One of the things that the city likes to accomplish is having all leases ending at the same time
Okay.
that we're responsible for. So does it make more sense instead of 17 months to commit to 29 months? I mean, that ends the lease at a certain point. That's convenient for us. but it also doesn't get you caught in a position where you really only have 12 months effectively that you have use of the building that's guaranteed.
I guess I don't have a calendar in front of me right now. So if you look at it, we look at getting somebody in there in June. All right, so that's 6 months from now, and then you figure you want to carry it, and you want to carry it from to June. So that's 12. It would probably end up being around like 30 months if my math is correct. So I personally don't have a problem with it being 29, but I'll let Diana speak to that.
My gut is you go with the shorter, are we seeing in December 2019? Is that when you would want your leases to end in December?
June
30.
June.
The Cohen's, all of our leases are set up to renew or terminate June
In June.
30 with
Fiscal year.
fiscal year.
Okay.
So you're
All right.
talking about a 12-month program for the person who's going to be leasing from you.
That's correct.
So if you're going to start them in July, your lease is up at the end of that first attempt to see whether this works or not. Is that a sufficient period of time? I think that unless the city finds a use and sells the building, that you're probably fine with that, but does that protect you enough? Are you okay with that?
I think because I would be fine with ending it in June of 28, we're in 18 now, aren't we? 19, sorry, June of 2019, with the discussion that leading up to it, if we want to look at that entire block and what's the options that we have there, the city has options there, or if we want to continue the program in that location or look at other locations.
Okay.
So
Doesn't that only give us one?
it would only give
Gives
us
you
one.
one
We
cycle.
would have the first option to renew a lease unless there's something larger that we have opportunity to go in those spaces.
Will it be a single tenant in that space or
That-
multi-tenant?
That particular space would probably be just one. It's only 800 square feet. And so we've had a lot of interest already. We have 8 people that are registered for Co-Starter. We can take 4 more. But I think with that space, with 800 square feet, you would only have one.
I don't see an option in the lease, at least that I can see.
An option to come back and, I think we're open enough to have a dialogue that I feel very confident working with you all.
It does say
Because,
June
I mean,
30th
we
in
want
here
the best for downtown, and we want the best for that 300 block of Main Street. And, right now, I think the best use for that space is retail. But there may come a time with as hands-on leaves and as we look at all those properties that the city owns, that there may be something that comes about that will be
Okay,
better use for that.
you've addressed one thing that staff had recommended that was different from what you initially proposed, and that's that you are fine with the June 30th, 2019 termination. The other has to do with paying a certain amount of rent to the city. Can you indicate to us whether that presents any type of difficulties for you?
I think one of the discussions is we want to make sure that people get started on the right foot, that there's not a huge outlay of cash when you're looking at opening your own business. But we also want to make sure that they are responsible and know that when you lease a space, you also have to pay utilities. And so one of the things that this committee looked at was if we didn't give it to them. We created a lease that was, had them already paying their utilities to start out with, but then built them up on a lease payment by the end of the 12 months. They would be not quite to where they would be paying a lease for a larger space, but getting used to doing that.
I understand that. I understand the people that you're going to lease this to's obligations. I'm talking about the JCA's obligations with a certain amount of rent paid to the city. So that's a little different question.
Right, right. I believe if there's no other way, the JCDA would agree to pay the $100 a month lease. Obviously, we would like to be able to really put that money into the program itself. We know that there's going to have to be some work to come in, paint, clean, add some furnishings for retail and that type of thing. So the money that we received in the grant will not cover the lease payment.
Have we been getting any lease payment on that space?
$100 a month.
$100 a month?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, from Blue Plum?
Yes, ma'am.
And you are aware that the electrical service originates in that space for all three spaces? Now,
Commissioners, I'm not so concerned about getting $100 a month back to us, if this helps us. I mean, we need to become that city where small business want to come and start up. I mean, I think that's a part of our future, is having more small business. And I think this is kind of an exciting program to help small entrepreneurs, because the unsuccess rate of a small startup is very high. So the more we can get that, and then if we can get them to occupy a building 3 doors down or around the block or whatever, then that's just good for the city all the way around, so.
We'd be glad to work any type of the utility payment. The understanding of the leasee is that they get used to paying utilities, and they pay, so I don't know how.
I mean, I think we get that, we understand that part of it, it's just how are you going to the electric bill is in the name of the city right now. But it's for all three spaces.
All three spaces.
Explain that. The heating system for all three spaces is on
We
this.
pay the water, sewer, garbage, and the gas.
I want to
natural
rent from you.
gas. They pay the electrical. It's the way it's configured. And so we're responsible for the envelope. We're responsible for anything, the roof, the drainage, all the rest. If the HVAC system goes out, we're responsible for that. That's in the lease. So there is a cost that ranges over the last 4 years between $1,200, $1,300 and $2,000 for all three spaces in utility fees. And then if something goes wrong, we pick that up. And I don't know what that number is.
Bill, is that per year or per month?
That's per year.
Okay.
And does that include electric?
No.
No.
Electric's separate.
Are there 3 meters or just
No,
1 meter?
For the electric, there are 3 meters.
There's three, but it's the heating that is.
It's the heating
Oh,
and
it's
the,
the heating,
and
okay.
the,
It's all
and the
one big
water
deal.
and sewer.
What, I mean, if I may, what if you restructured
Yeah.
it to where the city was not responsible for any of the utilities, and you eliminate the $100 a month lease payment, and everybody's responsible for all their own utilities?
What say you, JCDA?
That would be difficult because we would then have to set up.
Is
a
there just
system.
one water meter down there for all three
Right.
spaces?
Right, you could.
Oh,
that'd be
okay,
tough.
okay, never mind. I'm sorry. I was thinking there was 3 separate water meters
One
anyway.
meter for everything except electricity.
We're just trying to stay whole. I know that the numbers look odd, but if we did run into a big expense, we're big supporters of the program. I think it's fantastic. I don't see where $100 is going to shake anybody, but that's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make anything on this. It's certainly not the intention.
not
I just
our-
don't want to get stuck with a bill, that's all. But maybe we need our accountants to tell us how to reconcile this. I don't know. You know what, I think we know where you live. If, I'm comfortable with it as it is. Strike that 100, let's go, and we'll figure it out. All right.
Is this a motion and vote, or?
It could be.
So the motion, let me just clarify, the motion would be that,
Except
as we have in our packet, that it will terminate on June the 30th, 2019, and that in consideration of the rights granted, the lessee hereunder, the lessee shall and hereby agrees to pay to lessor the sum of $0 per month due on the first day of each month, beginning with the date of commencement of this lease. Is that correct?
And we
That's
expect
your
that
motion.
paid.
Zero better be there.
That better be there.
You're going to hear from your attorney that you've got to have an amount in there, $1, $10 a year or
All right,
something.
about $1 a month.
Put
Can you
$1
do
a month
that?
in there, how about
All
it?
right.
So that's your motion?
Well, and if you knew what the, no, never mind, just shut up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
$1 a month or $1 a year?
$1 a month.
It'd be easier for them to make one annual payment on everybody.
About $1 a year. Yeah.
How's that sound?
All
All right.
Great.
That work?
So
It's,
maybe,
it's a fine program that you're getting started. I hope that you find some very successful businesses in the process.
we expect to see a lot of new sales tax generated.
That,
At least
800 square foot
$1.
building.
At least $1 a year, right?
Just
right
make sure
product.
it's not online sales.
That's
That's all we
right.
ask.
And did you notice that was very intentionally
Yeah.
put in there, that it
Yeah.
had to be,
Thank you.
Right product, they'll make it.
All right,
Call
that
the
was a motion.
question.
That was a motion. Do we have a second?
You're pulling that from the consent agenda and voting separately.
Correct.
Okay.
Second.
Do we have to vote to pull it from the consent agenda?
I move that we pull the lease of the space at 325 1/2 East Main Street to Johnson City Development Authority from the agenda and vote it separately.
There's a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes. Now, would you like to restate your motion?
I believe that was your motion.
Oh, was it? Well, yours
It
was,
was.
you amended it, so. I'll make a motion to accept this agreement of lease with the amending the rental from $100 per month to $1 per year.
I'll second that.
All the items being the same. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin? Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes.
Make sure we're invited to the ribbon cuttings for the first tenant.
Ordinances.
Did they, Janet, did they vote to approve the consent agenda?
That's still up.
Okay.
Move approval of the balance of the consent agenda.
Second.
Second, any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van
Yes.
Brocklin? Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes.
I think that'll be cleaner that way.
Okay, your next item for consideration is ordinance number 4653-18. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled "An Ordinance to Adopt a Code of Laws and Ordinances for the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith, and amendatory thereof by changing from PB Planned Business District to R4 Medium Density Residential District, a portion of certain property 038I-B-029 located along Peoples Street, ready for your consideration on first reading. Song, if you could explain the issue, please.
This is a piece of property on People's Street. The City Commission had considered this particular request first meeting in December last year. The use has not changed, but the zone has changed. At that consideration, the rezoning was to change the zone of the property from PB to RP5. Upon further review, staff determined that this particular use could not be considered as a multifamily development, which would otherwise be permitted in an RP5 district. This, although classified as an independent senior living facility, it's really, he calls it independent dominion living, but it's really an assisted living facility. It's not a multifamily development, which is not permitted in the RP5 district. So we had to reinitiate the rezoning and get an appropriate zone for it, which in this case will be the R4 district. The property currently adjoins an R4 district So this rezoning would basically be an extension of the adjoining R4 district. The use remains the same, the density doesn't change. The concept plan has not been changed. On this concept plan at this time, he has shown the location of the 15-feet wide buffer, which was not shown in the previous concept plan. Everything remains the same. Planning Commission is recommending approval.
Very good.
Move approval.
Got a motion, about a second.
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brook?
Yes.
Mayor Tamita?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tom. At this time, for your excitement this evening, we would like to have the ladies come forward and present your audit for fiscal year 2017, so Tara, if you would, please, ma'am.
Thank you for having me. This is hopefully exciting a little, as much as you can make accounting. It is a very good report this year. I was pleased with the way that the final report turned out. Hopefully you are too. I first would like to extend a thank you to Janet and the Finance Department. Without their help, of course, we couldn't get through this audit every year. A couple of changes that you'll notice if you go through the report from what you've seen in previous presentations. The biggest of those is related to the Johnson City Power Board's transition to the Energy Authority. With that, as of June 30, your balance sheet that's reported in the CAFR for the Power Board will reflect all zero balances because as of June 30, it was not a fund of the city anymore. What we did have to do, because that transition occurred March 31st, 2017, we had those 9 months of revenues and expense activity for the Power Board that was still city-related. So those 9 months are reflected in your income statement for the Power Board. There's also significantly less disclosure in the footnote section related to the Power Board, and this will come up in a few minutes when I go through some of the specifics. In addition to that, we lucked out this year and didn't have a lot of new regulations that required amendments to our accounting and financial reporting process. The only one that we did have to implement was GASB 77 related to tax abatements. We addressed that by way of a new footnote disclosure that just lays out any of those agreements that are in place with the Industrial Development Board. What you have been given is a one-page summary. This is basically my talking points, but I thought because of the dollar amounts that are in there, it would be helpful to have those in front of you. If there are other items as I go through this that you want to discuss, feel free to stop me and we'll go through those as well. Again, speaking to the Finance Department, we did also get the GFOA Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 2016 audit. That's the 16th consecutive year the city has received that. That is no small feat. So it's very impressive. That is included in the front part of the CAFR. On page 2, you have our opinion letter. It's a clean opinion. That's the best that you can get for an audit. Immediately following the opinion letter is management's discussion and analysis. That 300-page report is quite hefty reading. If you were only going to look at a certain section of it, the MD&A is what I would recommend you read. It's written by Janet Jennings, and it basically goes through a summary of all the activity.
Well worth reading.
All the activity for the year. And it has some comparisons to prior year information. It also has some highlights related to capital assets and debt activity, which is always of interest. In addition to that, there is some documentation about future plans for the city. The financial statements start on page 17. We start off with the government-wide financials, which is basically all long-term assets and liabilities for the city, and it includes governmental and business-type activities. The total net position at the end of 2017's fiscal year was over $351 million. That's a very, very strong net position. It is a decrease from the prior year, however, and that was solely due to that transition from the Power Board to the Energy Authority. Specifically, the Power Board itself was $178.8 million of that. If that were not a factor, you would have had an increase in net position because all of the other governmental funds had an increase of over $26 million. So although it looks like it was a decrease, it was not a negative impact on the city. Part of that $351 million is invested in capital assets, and that amount was over $282 million. That's very important because it shows that the city is investing in its infrastructure, its schools, school buses, capital projects, a lot that the citizens actually see when you guys are out working on intersections and things like that. Moving on, the debt activity, which is always of great interest. The city is still well below their legal debt limit. Actually, 53% is where you are right now, so there's still quite a bit of capacity there if it was needed. Quite a bit of debt activity happened during the year that was a little unusual because of all the changes with the power board, and then also new bond issues. $41 million was issued by the city, and $7.9 million was issued by the PBA. A big portion of this was refunding debt, so it actually refunded some 2006 and 2009 bonds. That amount was $30,695,000 that was refunded. So basically, that amount is part of the new debt, but you've got a lower interest rate on it. So in the long run, it saves the city money. The power board's debt coming off the books was $41,235,000. So that's a huge decrease that's no longer reported on the city. And then actual debt payments during the year were $16,746,000. So it's very impressive to have paid that much towards your debt and still have such a capacity to lend more if it were needed.
Is a part of the 16 million, part of the power board when they were still on our books?
No,
Is that some of their
actually,
debt
that
service?
16 million is
Just
straight
strictly-
city
okay,
payments.
thank you.
The power board's debt was 41 million that came off the books.
Oh, in total, yeah.
For that new debt that was issued, the portion that was not to refund the older bonds, it went to things like the Performing Arts Center, school roofing projects, the Langston school maintenance building, energy improvements. So a lot of good things were actually done with those funds this year. Speaking of some of those capital projects, several other CIP projects were completed of the year. Some of these were bond funded. Some were grant funded, which we'll talk about in a second. But some of the completion projects were infrastructure, some Freedom Hall renovations, the Boundless Playground, which has received a whole lot of really great interest. I think anybody that's been there has been very impressed. The school maintenance building, signalization projects, street extensions, and water and sewer line extensions. There were also several straight purchases, such as 2 buses, a street sweeper, several radio upgrades, and other large equipment items. Of those purchases, a big portion of that was grant money. The city expended over $16 million in federal grant dollars during the year and over $2.5 million in state dollars. Those things go to fund education, food service, police and public service, community development, transit, and other transportation projects. Specifically related to the grants, you'll see 2 letters in the back of the CAFR. We issue those every year. One of those is a report on compliance and internal controls over compliance, and that is specific to uniform guidance. So there we have an opportunity to lay out any issues that we found in the grant testing that we've done. During this past fiscal year, we audited as major the breakfast and lunch program, the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant, and some of the transit grants. In none of those did we have any material weaknesses or anything that needed reported in that letter, so that's great news. We also have a schedule of findings and question costs, which this also gives us an opportunity to lay out issues that we had. There were none that needed reported this year, so we had no material weaknesses and none of a significant level that required inclusion in the report. We also had 1 finding from the previous year that was corrected during the year, so we were able to report that as a disposition of that finding. That is all I have, short and sweet. So if there are any questions, I'll entertain those.
I have a question about, and Janet, this may be you as well. On our revenue sources on business tax, we collected $2.3, almost $2.4 million this past year. The latest tax bill that went through Congress, is it going to affect our business tax? Anybody know?
It may, I don't know. We've not evaluated that.
It should not, because the business tax
just won't pay as much tax. We're gonna get this out.
They adjusted the federal tax, they didn't adjust the state tax, and what we receive and report is state tax, state
Right,
business
and it's
tax.
not business
Help it just
tax.
trickle down
It's,
to
no,
us.
it's not business tax, and it should not be related to, that's more like, I mean, it's called a business tax and license. It's related to the tax for the benefit of being able to be in business and to have that license to do it. The taxes that they have affected would be what would go on their 1120 if they're a corporation or something of that nature, but it would not affect these.
I would like to say that the highlight sheet is appreciated.
Yes,
Good.
very much.
It's
Thank you.
helpful.
Thank you. All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, that takes you to the end of your agenda for this evening.
Vote to accept the audit?
You certainly may. Yes, ma'am.
Do we have to vote to accept the audit?
You do not.
Okay.
If you want to, you can, but
it's
it is
okay.
what it is.
Submitted to the state.
It's
too
already
late.
gone.
Appreciate it, but it's too late.
Do we get a copy of the school audit?
School audit.
Do we get a copy?
It's in here.
It's
It's included in this?
in
Okay.
here. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank
I
you.
do go and present separately to their board. I'm doing that February 5th.
Okay.
And I just basically pull out their section of the financial statements and go over some school-related specific highlights, so. Thank you.
In the information section of your packet, there are a couple of things I would like to bring your attention to. It's the last two items. Tom has prepared a very comprehensive report on the effects of the freeze event that I thought we were out of, but it seems to continue to linger. Just highlights of that real quick. We've had 700 requests from our customers. Of those, 500 were no water calls, and of those 500, almost 300 were issues on the customer side of the meter, which we went ahead and tried to help them locate and get the water back on. 200 of those calls involved replacing meters or thawing city service lines. There were 27 mainline breaks. Majority of those were repaired while the line was hot and there was still water running. We've currently got about 950 miles of water distribution lines with 45,000 total accounts. What we find that breaks is the cast iron main lines. Typically, they break what we call a round. It's not very often we see a longitudinal break. So it's something that once we locate it, we can excavate a pit. The guys have to shut the water off or reroute water, shut it off at that location. They can put a band around it and fix it fairly quickly. Keisha had pointed out to me earlier, we got a lot of very positive comments and responses from our customer base for the efficient and the quick response that we were getting back to our customers to get the water back on. Hopefully none of you all have experienced this, but there's a picture in here of these guys fixing a water break. When you're standing there in waist-deep water and it's zero outside, that is one tough job. Those folks do a tremendous job down there, and I just wanted to recognize them. The other thing, real quick, there's an energy savings report in the back of your packet associated with the projects we've done with ESG. We've done 44 total facilities. This past year, our municipal energy savings for the year totaled $359,000, which exceeded the guaranteed amount by $100,000, for a grand total savings over on the municipal government side of $2,645,000 over the life of the program to date. Schools saved $617,000 last year for total savings through the project of $3,789,000. Together, cities and schools have saved $977,000 in energy savings last year, and we have saved over $6.4 million since the project was first initiated. So it's been tremendously successful. It has allowed us to take the energy savings and reinvest in our buildings to where the majority of them have new windows, new doors, new lighting, HVAC systems, roofs. It's been a very successful program and something that hopefully we can keep growing and produce better results for you.
We have a total of the debt service payments made over that period of time related to those projects? Because that would be the interesting number to have, because then you can subtract that out. and you know
How long
what
it
your
takes
true
to pay off
savings
what we
is.
did.
Jan, can you put that together for us, please, ma'am, and we'll get it to you by the first of the week. Yes, sir. So thank you for letting me share that with you. I just thought that was really important for our customer base to realize that some of the investments that you have made are really resulting in a lot of savings and improved efficiencies. And at that, we would be glad to take any questions or directions that the commission may have.
Okay. Well, just looking at those pictures of our water sewer folks out there working, and they do a Herculean job out there. Mr. Witherspoon was here, he's gone, but thank you and your people for
There he is.
what you do. Yeah, there you are. It's the kind of thing you never know you need till you need it. And I was several times driving in my nice warm car, looking at it, and next time I see that, I need to, and hope everybody else would, run them some coffee or hot chocolate or something, because that's a job I don't think I could do. So, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
They were out there putting new water lines down today, and it was awfully cold. They were right next to my house, so I saw them for a while, so.
And
it's,
they're next to my house, too.
Yes.
But,
23 right now, so still,
Yeah,
still
it's not
cold.
warm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will. Well, since being nothing left, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.